Have you ever done something small, something instinctive, something you believed was harmless for all of 2 seconds, and then watched it become the center of a disaster so complete it made you doubt your own memory? Because that is exactly what happened to me. And by the time you see the whole shape of it, you are going to understand how fragile the truth can look when everyone else is holding the evidence. My name is Aaron Whitaker. I am 44 years old. I run a regional freight and infrastructure company out of Tampa, Florida. I coach youth baseball on Saturdays. I send thank you notes. I tip generously. I remember anniversaries and dog names and who takes cream in their coffee. And according to one detective in Hillsborough County, I tried to drug my wife with a glass of water. Let me take you back to the day it started. April 16th, a Wednesday, 8:11 in the morning. The kind of morning that looks innocent enough to ruin you. I woke up feeling lighter than I had in years because the night before, just after 11 o'clock, the final transfer on the biggest deal of my life had landed. 26 months of negotiations, 3 collapsed versions, 2 legal teams in Atlanta, 1 miserable tax specialist in Miami, endless flights, endless calls, endless nights where I came home too late to be useful to anyone and too tired to know whether I was doing any of it for the right reasons anymore. And then suddenly, there it was, $120 million. I stood in my kitchen barefoot, phone in hand, staring at the screen like it might vanish if I blinked. Our kitchen faced east, and the morning light was hitting the marble counters in that bright, expensive way I had once thought meant I had made it. My wife, Natalie, came downstairs a minute later in a pale gray robe, hair still loose from sleep, and gave me one look. "You're smiling like a lottery winner," she said. "Come here." She walked over with her usual unhurried grace. Natalie never moved quickly unless something was actually on fire. She took the phone from my hand, looked at the number, and for a second I watched her face the way people watch the horizon right before weather changes. She did not gasp. She did not squeal. She did not do the kind of delighted performance other people might have expected. She just lifted her eyes to mine and said, very quietly, "So it's done." That was Natalie, cool as glass. A woman who could receive life-altering news with the same composure most people use to discuss dinner reservations. I kissed her forehead, told her I loved her. She handed my phone back, poured herself coffee, and carried the mug into the sitting room off the kitchen like I had just shown her a mildly impressive kitchen renovation instead of a number that would alter the rest of our lives. I followed her. And for maybe 20 minutes we talked like we used to talk before the business began swallowing every useful hour I had. We talked about the trip we kept promising ourselves, Greece maybe, or the Amalfi Coast. Natalie wanted Greece because she claimed the light there made even tired people look cinematic. I wanted somewhere with fewer stairs and less opportunity to fall into the Mediterranean and ruin the entire point of becoming financially comfortable. We talked about finally redoing the kitchen, new cabinetry, bigger island, maybe tearing down the wall between the dining room and the den. We talked about what the money meant beyond the money, not yachts or vanity, relief, space, proof that the years of missing dinners and anniversaries and ordinary Tuesday evenings had not all disappeared into a hole. At one point, I took her hand and said, "None of this matters if you aren't standing in the middle of it with me." She squeezed once. "I know." Before I go further, I need to tell you about someone else. Her name was Celia Navarro. She had been our housekeeper for 9 months, mid-50s, quiet, precise, the sort of person who could straighten a room without appearing to touch anything. She arrived every weekday at exactly 7:45, never 7:44, never 7:46. She made excellent coffee, folded towels like a luxury hotel, and had a way of moving through the house that made her feel both invisible and deeply aware of everything. I liked Celia. Or rather, I liked what I thought I knew about her. What I did not know was that somewhere in those 9 months, Celia had started watching my wife with the alert attention of a woman who had privately decided something was wrong. Not rude, not difficult, wrong. Dangerous, maybe. That was the word she eventually used. And by the time she used it aloud, my life had already split open. Later that afternoon, Natalie suggested we celebrate at home. Nothing elaborate, she said. No restaurant, no crowd, just dinner in, a good bottle of wine, maybe candles if she felt theatrical. Celia prepared sea bass, roasted fingerling potatoes, asparagus with lemon, and a salad none of us needed, but all of us pretended made the meal healthier. Natalie set the table herself, which she almost never did. She lit candles, brought out the linen napkins her mother had given us, chose the heavy water glasses we used when we were pretending not to be tired. It was a beautiful evening. That is important. Things were not tense. We were not fighting. There was no obvious fracture in the room. If you had walked past the windows around 7:30 that night, you would have seen a married couple under candlelight talking about tile options and travel and whether one person could reasonably buy 15 olive oil bottles in Athens without becoming insufferable. Then Natalie stood to get water. She went into the kitchen, came back with 2 glasses, and placed one in front of me. She sat down, raised her own glass slightly, and said, "To finally exhaling." I picked mine up, and that was when Celia appeared. Not from the kitchen, from the hall. That detail matters. She had no reason to be in the hall. Cleanup was behind the kitchen. The laundry room was off the back corridor. But there she was, carrying a basket of rolls no one had asked for, moving just close enough to my right shoulder that I could smell starch and lavender detergent on her blouse. As she set the basket down, she leaned in very slightly and whispered, so softly only I could hear it. "Don't drink that. Switch the glasses." Then she straightened and said in her normal voice, "Would you like anything else?" and walked away as though she had not just placed an explosive device in the center of my mind. I sat there. Natalie was speaking. Something about grease, or maybe countertops. I honestly do not remember. The only thing I remember clearly is the feeling that moved through me in that second. It was not thought. It was instinct. Animal, blunt, unreasonable instinct. So I switched them. Smoothly. Quietly. The way you might move the salt closer to yourself. Natalie glanced down at her phone at exactly the right moment, smiled at whatever she saw, and by the time she looked up again, her glass was in front of me and mine was in front of her. That was all. A small movement. One simple adjustment. We kept eating, kept talking. I made a joke about us buying an old villa and growing intolerably opinionated about seafood. Natalie laughed. I remember that because it was the last normal sound before the night changed shape. A few minutes later, she lifted the glass that had originally been meant for me and took a long drink. Then something in her face shifted. Very slightly. She touched the base of her throat. Blinked twice. "You all right?" I asked. She frowned. "That's strange." Within a minute, she wasn't strange. She was gasping. One hand gripping the table edge, eyes wide in a way I had never seen, lips parting around air that wasn't cooperating. "Aaron," she managed. I was already on my feet. I called 911. I remember kneeling beside her. Remember the candles still burning. Remember the sea bass going cold on the plate. Remember shouting her name and telling the dispatcher she was conscious, then barely conscious, then conscious again. Somewhere in the back of the house, Celia heard everything, every word, every desperate second. Natalie survived. That part I can tell you now. The story is not about whether she lived. It is about what came after she did. 3 days later, I sat across from Detective Miles Donnelly in interview room B at the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office while he slid a still photograph across the table and tapped the image with one blunt finger. There I was, my hand crossing the table, the glass moving. In freeze frame, stripped of context, it looked deliberate enough to belong in a training manual. "Mr. Whitaker," he said, "you want to explain why you switched your wife's drink?" And sitting there under fluorescent lights in a gray room that smelled faintly of stale coffee and floor cleaner, I realized something ugly and immediate. The truth was the least believable thing I could possibly say. Here is something no one tells you about innocence. It does not feel clean. It does not feel righteous. It does not arrive in your chest like certainty. When nobody believes you, innocence feels exactly like guilt. Same weight, same nausea, same sense that the room has somehow shrunk around your body. Detective Donnelly had the face of a man who believed in simple conclusions. Broad shoulders, tired eyes, one of those mustaches that had clearly survived several personal reinventions out of sheer stubbornness. He kept a legal pad in front of him but wrote very little, which told me he was not collecting information. He was checking whether the version he already preferred would hold up. "You switched the glasses," he said again. "Yes." "Why?" "Our housekeeper told me to." He wrote that down. "Celia Navarro," he said. "Yes." "Who, according to her statement, was not in the dining room at any point during that portion of the meal." The floor did not fall out from under me. It just sagged enough to let panic in. "That's not true." She seemed certain. "She's lying." Donnelly looked at me with an expression I recognized from years of dealing with damaged contracts and compromised people. Polite skepticism. The kind that says, "I'm giving you one last chance to stop embarrassing yourself." "Your wife had a sedative compound in her system," he said. "High concentration. Toxicology came back this morning." "That did not come from me." "You switched the glass." "Because Celia told me not to drink it." "Yet she says no such conversation occurred." I had no answer for that. No witness. No audio. Just a security still of my own hand moving the evidence into my wife's reach, and a housekeeper who had apparently decided that if she was going down, she would not go alone. They let me leave that afternoon. No arrest. Not yet. But the detective shook my hand at the door with the special politeness reserved for people who might still be coming back under much worse circumstances. I drove home numb. The house looked untouched from the outside, which felt obscene. The same iron gate, same ficus by the front walk, same pale stucco and dark trim and expensive silence. Inside, the dining room still held the faint ghost of that night. A water ring on the table, one candle stub burned lower than the others, an arrangement of flowers already starting to turn. I stood there for longer than I should have. Then I started calling Celia. 4 times. Straight to voicemail. Her outgoing message was clipped and efficient. "You've reached Celia Navarro. Please leave a message." "Celia," I said into the 4th one, "this is Aaron Whitaker. You need to call me back tonight. If you think I'm the problem here, you are out of your mind. If you know something, say it. If you lied because you panicked, fix it. But call me back." She didn't. That night I did what frightened men with too much money and too little trust eventually do. I started digging. I searched her name first. Tampa, Florida, then broader, then older. And eventually I found something that turned my stomach. Not a criminal record, not a lawsuit, nothing that direct. A neighborhood forum thread from about a year earlier. One of those clumsy local sites that looked like they were designed by a suspicious uncle in 2006. An anonymous post describing a housekeeper in Scottsdale, quiet, meticulous, increasingly fixated on the idea that the wife of the household was dangerous. The poster described small incidents, comments, rearranged objects, odd warnings, a growing atmosphere of paranoia. Eventually, the employer let her go because, in his words, she had begun behaving less like domestic staff and more like private security nobody had requested. No names. But the timeline fit perfectly. I read it 4 times. Then I started calling the agency we had hired her through. Prestige Residential Services. A polished website, vague testimonials, expensive rates. They confirmed only the last 2 years of employment. Before that, nothing concrete. Her references were technically real people, but one sounded startled to hear she had been used at all, and the other number had been disconnected. By 10:30 the next morning, I was in the office of my attorney, Monica Bell. Monica charged $500 an hour and somehow made that feel reasonable. I told her everything: the whisper, the switch, Donnelly, the tox screen, the forum post, the lie. She listened without interrupting, which was unusual for her and therefore alarming. Then she asked, "Is there any reason your wife would want to harm you?" I nearly laughed. "No." "You're sure?" "I put $120 million into our joint future less than 12 hours before this happened." Monica nodded once. "Right." Then she leaned back and said the sentence that should have occurred to me first. "If Celia told you not to drink it, how did she know?" That question sat with me all night. I could think of 3 possibilities. 1. She saw Natalie do something to the water and then, for reasons beyond logic, lied to the police. 2. She was suspicious of Natalie in some broader, irrational way and warned me based on paranoia, while the sedative came from somewhere else entirely. Or 3. Celia knew what was in the glass because Celia had put it there herself. I was at St. Joseph's by 7 the next morning. Natalie was sitting up in bed, pale but intact, with an IV in one arm and the expression of a woman deeply offended by hospital lighting. "You look awful," she said when I walked in. "You're in a hospital bed," I said. "I feel entitled to a little roughness." She almost smiled. Then she looked at me carefully. "They told you what it was." "A sedative." She nodded. "I got the water myself." "I know." "I filled both glasses from the kitchen filter. I brought them straight back." She looked down at her hands. "Aaron, I don't understand how this happened." I believed her. Completely. And that left one person standing in the empty space. I had just reached the parking garage and was pulling my keys from my pocket when my phone rang from an unknown number. I answered anyway. Silence first. Then her voice. "Mr. Whitaker." "Celia." "Why did you lie to the police?" A pause. "Because I panicked." "That is not an explanation." "No," she said quietly. "It isn't." I stood beside my car and waited. Then she said, "When I went back into the kitchen after dinner, I found something. Something that made me think this is bigger than the water. Bigger than your wife." "What?" "Not on the phone." My grip tightened on the keys. "When?" "Tomorrow morning." "Where?" "Sunrise Diner on Fowler. 7 o'clock. Come alone." Then, after a pause that did not feel accidental, "And do not tell your wife." The line went dead. The truth, if that was what she had, chose to arrive in a diner at 7 in the morning. Of course it did. Sunrise Diner sat off Fowler Avenue in the kind of strip that survives by serving eggs to people too tired or too unsettled to eat anywhere stylish. I arrived first, took the back booth facing the door. Old habit. A childish impulse to keep from being surprised by anyone else. Celia arrived at 7:03. Same severe bun, same navy cardigan, same face that could have passed for ordinary if you did not look long enough to see the strain under it. She sat without asking and folded her hands. "Thank you for coming alone," she said. "I almost didn't." "That would have been wise." "Wise is behind us," I said. "Start talking." She looked down at her hands and said, "I have been watching your wife for 6 months." The waitress appeared. I ordered coffee. Celia asked for nothing. "Explain that sentence very carefully," I said after the waitress left. She took a breath. "I know what people say about Scottsdale," she said. "About the Hendersons. Gerald Henderson believed I imagined things. He told people I saw danger where there was none. But I was right. His wife was moving money from household accounts for nearly 2 years. I saw the pattern. He did not. They divorced 14 months later. You are opening with your resume?" I am opening with the fact that I know how I sound. That, at least, was fair. Then she told me the rest. About 6 months earlier, while cleaning the upstairs office Natalie sometimes used for personal paperwork, Celia had found a stack of printed emails tucked inside a hardbound design book on the shelf. She said she had not intended to snoop. I did not believe that. I also no longer cared. She read them. The emails were between Natalie and a man whose name dropped into my body like a stone. Evan Whitaker, my younger brother. The brother I had not spoken to in almost 5 years. The one who challenged our father's business succession after the funeral and lost badly enough to blame me for the humiliation. The one who looked me in the eye outside the probate courthouse and said, "You will regret this." Apparently, he had not moved on as gracefully as I had hoped. What were they discussing? I asked, already knowing I would hate the answer. A strategy, Celia said, to challenge the original ownership chain of your company before the merger finalized. I stared at her. She nodded once. Your brother had apparently found a lawyer in Chicago willing to explore whether there were irregularities in the early capitalization agreements from when your father backed the business. The merger. Of course. A challenge before close could freeze everything. A challenge after close could transform into something larger, uglier, more expensive. That's why Natalie had the emails, I said. She was documenting him. Perhaps. I looked up. Perhaps? Celia held my eyes. Or perhaps she was helping him. I let that sit there for all of 3 seconds before rejecting it. No. If Natalie had put the sedative in my glass, she would never have drunk from the switched one. She would have found some elegant reason not to touch it. Headache, nausea, no thirst. Anything. Instead, she had lifted it without hesitation and nearly ended up in intensive care. I said that out loud. Celia listened, then lowered her eyes and said, I know. The waitress brought my coffee. I did not touch it. What does that mean? A long silence. Then Celia said, I put it in your glass. The diner did not stop. Plates still clattered. Someone's toddler still complained loudly about pancakes. A truck rumbled past outside, but for me the room changed shape. You put it in my glass. A mild sedative, she said quickly. Not enough to seriously harm you, enough to make you drowsy, to slow the evening. Give me time. Time for what? To confront her, to ask about the emails, to stop whatever I believed was happening. I leaned back and stared at her. And then you told me not to drink it. Because I changed my mind. After poisoning me. She flinched. After making a terrible decision. I said nothing. She went on because silence was clearly worse for her than accusation. I was standing in the hall with the bread basket, she said. I heard the two of you talking, laughing. You looked... She shook her head. You looked happy, real. And she looked at you with such ease that suddenly I could not tell if I had built something monstrous out of suspicion. I panicked. I told you to switch the glasses because I thought she would only become slightly drowsy. I did not know she had a sensitivity to the compound. I should tell you I was furious. I was. But my anger came out cold. Almost disappointingly calm. You drugged me based on a theory. I believed I was protecting you. From what? She met my eyes then. From the possibility that your wife and your brother were moving against you, and that you were too trusting to see it. I paid for the coffee I had not touched, and left. An hour later, I was back in Monica Bell's office. This time she interrupted frequently, which was oddly reassuring. When I finished, she leaned back and organized the mess into pieces. Celia had administered the sedative. That was criminal. Her cooperation might matter for sentencing, but not for the charge. Her testimony also established that she had lied in her initial statement to police. That mattered for me. The security footage showed the glass switch. True. It also showed her entering the room and leaning toward me. That would matter too once someone bothered to look at the full sequence instead of the frame most flattering to a theory. Then there were the emails. If Natalie had been corresponding with Evan about a challenge to the ownership structure, Monica wanted those immediately. Whether Natalie had been building a file against him or entertaining the possibility of helping him was still the central question. "And if she knew," I asked, "but didn't tell me yet?" "That is not a crime," Monica said. "Bad marital timing is not generally chargeable." "And if she was helping him?" Monica held my gaze. "Then you have a different problem than the police." I went back to the hospital that afternoon. Natalie was sitting up straighter, color in her face, an untouched gelatin cup on the tray. She looked at me and knew instantly I had learned something. "Who is Evan to you this week?" she asked. "Not my favorite sibling." That got the faintest smile. Then I sat down and said, "How long has he been contacting you?" She did not play dumb. About that, I loved her more. 3 months, she said. "And the emails?" "I have them." "Why?" She folded her hands in her lap and answered in the voice she uses when she has decided honesty is the shortest route left. "Because I knew he was trying to build something against you. I did not know how much of it was bluff and how much was dangerous. So I let him talk. I kept records. I printed copies. I was going to take all of it to Monica once the merger closed and the timing was right." I stared at her. "The note on the last email," I said. "At the bottom. He wrote the cleanest outcome would be if the merger never closed. And you wrote, 'I know.'" Natalie exhaled. "Yes." "What did that mean?" "It meant I knew what he was trying to do," she said. "Aaron, I was not agreeing with him. I was marking it for the file. He'd already crossed from posturing into intent." The room went quiet. "You were protecting me." She looked mildly offended. "I have been protecting you for 12 years. Did you imagine I'd stop because you got richer?" There are moments when trust does not return dramatically. It simply settles back into place because the truth fits the person in front of you better than the fear did. That was one of those moments. Celia was charged with administering a harmful substance. Her attorney managed to reduce the ultimate outcome through cooperation, clean prior record, and the absence of lasting physical harm, but the charge stood. She testified fully. She told the truth in the end, which mattered. It did not erase what she had done. Evan's challenge never materialized. The Chicago lawyer became unavailable in a hurry once Monica's office sent notice that every communication was preserved and under review. Funny how courage evaporates when documentation enters the room. Detective Donnelly called me 3 weeks later and informed me, in the driest voice imaginable, that I was no longer considered a viable suspect. He did not apologize. I thanked him with all the warmth of a tax audit. Natalie came home on a Thursday afternoon, another Thursday, which felt to me like the universe making a small attempt at correction. She walked into the kitchen, set down her bag, looked around the too-quiet room and said, "We are gutting this kitchen." I laughed for the first time in weeks. "Whatever you want." She turned and looked at me. "You believed me." "Of course I did. Most people wouldn't have." "I'm not most people," I said. "I'm the man who handed his wife $120 million before breakfast and still thought the kitchen needed more light." That made her laugh. The real laugh. The one that starts low and escapes before she can stop it. And in that sound, standing there in an ordinary kitchen on an ordinary Thursday, with the sun coming in through the east windows, and no police waiting for me, and no poison in a glass, and no lies left between us that mattered, I felt the floor come back. Solid. Quiet. True. Not because innocence had protected me, because the truth finally had.